I never imagined that one small moment could change everything. But that's exactly what happened the night my stepson walked into my room by accident. It lasted only a split second, neither of us knowing what to do. But what followed stayed with me, lingering in my mind, making me question everything. So let me take you back to the moment it all began. My name is John. For the past few years, my life has been an endless cycle of routine and quiet loneliness. My wife, Madison, is a dedicated businesswoman, always away on trips. And when she's home, she's too tired to hold a real conversation. I told myself this was just how long-term marriages worked. But deep down, I knew better. I'd been craving something I no longer believed I could have. For years, I lived in a half-life, convincing myself I was content. I told myself it was selfish to want more. Then Mason moved in. He's Madison's son from her previous marriage. After finishing college, he decided to stay with us while job hunting. At first, I was simply glad to have someone else in the house. Someone who might bring a little life into these quiet walls. But things didn't stay simple for long. It began subtly. The way he looked at me, not quite the way a stepson looks at a stepfather. How our conversations seemed to linger longer than they should. How my pulse quickened when he brushed past me in the kitchen, his touch lasting just a heartbeat too long. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just starved for attention. But deep down, I knew the truth. And what unsettled me most was how much I liked it. His glances would hold for a moment too long. His expression would shift when I caught him looking, as though there was something he wanted to say but didn't. I noticed it all. And once I noticed, I couldn't stop noticing. I kept telling myself it was harmless, that it was only natural to enjoy feeling seen after so long. But the way Mason looked at me wasn't casual. It carried an intensity one couldn't ignore. It was the kind of look that made my chest tighten, my thoughts wander places they shouldn't, and I wasn't sure if I could resist it. One evening, as I stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes, I heard footsteps. I knew it was Mason before I even turned. "Hey," he said, his voice low and calm. "Hey," I replied, keeping my eyes on the soapy water. He stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. "What are you doing?" he asked softly. "Just cleaning up," I murmured. He didn't move away. Instead, he reached past me to place a glass in the sink, his arm brushing mine. It was such a small touch, but it stole my breath. I turned slightly, meeting his eyes in the dim light. They were darker than usual, unreadable, charged with something neither of us named. I should have stepped away, but I didn't. "Mason?" I whispered, uncertain of what I even meant to say. His gaze dropped briefly, and the air between us felt heavy, tense. I knew then this wasn't just in my head anymore. That time, nothing happened. But the night I was changing my clothes, everything shifted. Madison was away again, and Mason and I were the only ones home. I had just stepped out of the shower and walked into my room, wrapped in a towel. Without thinking, I started to get dressed, and that's when the door opened. I gasped, startled, my hands grabbing for something to cover myself. Mason stood frozen in the doorway, shock on his face, and something else I couldn't name. I'm sorry," he stammered, turning halfway to leave. "I thought you were downstairs." "Mason," I began, but my voice faltered. He could have walked away, but instead, he glanced back, his eyes holding mine for just a second too long. And I didn't tell him to leave. The silence between us felt thick, almost unbearable. I knew I should say something, but I stayed still. He hesitated, then slowly stepped back into the room and closed the door behind him. "I didn't mean," he began. "I know," I cut in gently. "It was an accident. Let's forget it happened." But we both knew we wouldn't forget. We couldn't. The air felt charged again, and for the first time I wasn't sure where this was going to lead. "John." My breath caught at the sound of my name on his lips. Not stepdad. Not even Mr. Parker. Just John. As if I were simply a man, not his mother's husband, not someone off limits. "We shouldn't," I whispered, though the words lacked conviction. He gave a small nod, but he didn't step away. I know. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The tension was unbearable, yet neither of us broke it. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, the steady rhythm of his breathing. I should have ended it, told him to leave, but I didn't. Instead, Mason's hand lifted, slow, hesitant, his fingertips brushing the fabric of my sleeve. It was the lightest touch, barely there, yet it sent a tremor down my spine. My chest tightened. I knew this was dangerous, that we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't undo. He stepped closer, just enough that I could see every shift in his expression. His eyes searched mine, silently asking a question neither of us dared to voice. I could have walked away, but I didn't. Mason! My voice was unsteady. His gaze flicked briefly to my lips, then back to my eyes. The air between us grew heavier, charged with something unspoken. "Tell me to leave," he murmured quietly. "And I will." I should have said it, should have found the strength to stop this before it spiraled. But the words wouldn't come. His jaw tensed, as though he was holding back something he didn't want to admit. Then, slowly, his hand hovered closer, close enough that I could feel his presence without contact. "You don't really want me to go, do you?" he asked. I swallowed hard, unable to answer because he was right. The silence between us seemed to deepen, each second stretching into eternity. "Mason," I said again, though I wasn't sure if it was meant as a warning or a plea. His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something far more complicated. His restraint was clear, and yet so was his longing. I should have been afraid of where this might lead, but instead, I felt more alive than I had in years. When his fingers finally rested gently against my arm, I didn't pull away. The touch was cautious, lingering, as if waiting for permission that I never gave verbally, only through my stillness. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his voice rough, almost pained. But I couldn't. Instead, I let the moment stand, a fragile, trembling thing balanced between us. Mason's breathing grew uneven. His eyes locked on mine, searching, questioning. I felt my own heartbeat thundering, each pulse echoing in my ears. "This is crazy," I murmured, almost to myself. "I know," he replied, but neither of us moved away. It felt as though the world outside the room had gone silent. Nothing existed but the closeness, the heat between us, and the sense that something irreversible was hovering just out of reach. I wasn't thinking about right or wrong. I wasn't thinking about consequences. All I could think about was him, and the way he made me feel seen. The quiet stretched, neither of us willing to break it. When he finally stepped back, it was slow, reluctant, his gaze lingering on me as if memorizing the moment. And even as distance returned, the air still felt charged, as though the conversation between us wasn't over. Not yet. The absence of his warmth was immediate, jarring. "I should go," Mason said again, but this time his voice carried a reluctant edge. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I actually wanted him to leave. He lingered for a heartbeat longer before finally turning away, disappearing into the dim hallway. As soon as he was gone, I released the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the counter, my body still humming from what had just happened. I had crossed a line, one I could never uncross. And yet, even as guilt coiled low in my chest, even as I told myself this was a mistake, I knew one thing for certain. This was wrong. But it wasn't over. Not even close. I was right, because after hours of silence, hours of avoiding each other, hours of restless thoughts, it began again. I hadn't seen him since he left my room. The minutes dragged, heavy with the echo of his presence. I tried to busy myself, cleaning, making tea I never drank, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. But nothing could quiet the storm in my mind. Then I heard footsteps. "Mason!" I didn't turn. I kept my eyes on the spotless counter, running a dish towel over it like it needed cleaning. But I could feel him, the weight of his presence filling the room. "You've been avoiding me," he said. His voice was steady, but there was something under it, something unspoken. I exhaled slowly, finally turning to face him. I thought you might need space. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. I don't. Silence. My heart pounded, but I didn't look away. There was no avoiding this anymore. Mason stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Do you regret it? The question made my pulse stutter. You already asked me that, I replied. And I still don't know. His jaw tightened. I don't. Mason, this is complicated. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, I know. I wanted to tell him we needed to stop, that this was dangerous. But when he took another step closer, the words died in my throat. I can't pretend nothing happened, he said, softer now, rawer. And I don't think you can either. I swallowed hard. That doesn't mean we should let it happen again. He studied me for a long moment, eyes searching mine. Then tell me you don't want to. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. His fingers brushed my arm. The faintest touch, but enough to send a shiver through me. That's what I thought, he murmured. I should have stepped away. But instead, I took a step forward, closing the distance. The tension between us snapped. Mason's hands found my waist, his grip firm but hesitant. Our foreheads nearly touched, our breathing uneven, the air between us thick and charged. John. His voice was low, rough, almost like a plea, and I didn't push him away. Reality was still there, waiting at the edges, but I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. We're not going to let this happen again, right? I asked quietly. His gaze didn't waver. Do you really want me to say that? I wanted to. I should have. But I couldn't. Mason, we can't. Your father will be here soon. His jaw tightened. For a moment he didn't move. Then, with a slow exhale, he stepped back, creating a distance that felt like a chasm. I know, he said, voice strained. I tried to steady my breathing, to ignore the emptiness that followed him. But as I looked at him, still watching me with an intensity that sent another shiver down my spine, my guard slipped. His fingers trailed lightly along my side, slow and deliberate. Goosebumps spread across my skin. Are you sure? He asked quietly, his voice just above a whisper. I swallowed. No. But it feels like I don't have a choice. The way he looked at me in that moment made it impossible to speak. The air thickened again, charged with the same pull that had been building for days. And then a sound. A knock. Sharp. Jarring. We both froze. John. My stomach twisted violently. It was Madison. Panic surged through me. I took a hurried step back, forcing my breathing to steady, trying to erase any trace of the moment we'd just shared. Mason glanced toward the door, his face unreadable, his hands dropping reluctantly to his sides. The spell was broken. For now. The absence of his warmth was instant and jarring. I should go, he said again. But this time his voice carried a trace of reluctance. I nodded, though my heart wasn't sure it wanted him to leave. He lingered a moment longer, then turned, disappearing into the dimly lit hallway. As soon as he was gone, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My hands gripped the counter for support, trembling. My whole body felt the shock of what had just happened. I had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. And yet, even with guilt curling deep in my stomach, I knew with absolute certainty this wasn't over. For hours I didn't see him. Time crawled by, heavy and suffocating. I busied myself with anything. Cleaning, making tea I didn't drink, scrolling endlessly. But nothing could silence the storm in my mind. Then I heard footsteps. Mason! I didn't turn around, keeping my focus on the spotless counter as my hands stilled. But I could feel him, the weight of his presence filling the air behind me. You've been avoiding me, he said, his voice steady but carrying something underneath. I thought you might need space. He leaned against the doorway, arms folded, gaze unreadable. I don't. Silence stretched between us. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. Do you regret it? You already asked that. And I don't know. His jaw tightened. I don't. This is complicated, I said quietly. Yeah, he breathed, almost bitterly. I wanted to tell him we had to stop, that it was too dangerous. But the words caught in my throat. I can't pretend it didn't happen, he said, his voice low, almost vulnerable. And I don't think you can either. That doesn't mean it should happen again. Then tell me you don't want to. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. His hand brushed lightly against my arm, sending a shiver through me. That's what I thought. I should have walked away. Instead, I closed the distance. Between us, the air between us tightened, charged, and before I could take another breath, we were caught in it again. Drawn together by something neither of us could fight. The world fell away, replaced by the rush of being close to him, of feeling his energy crash against mine. My resolve crumbled, and then a sound outside the room. We froze. Did you hear that? He whispered. A knock. John. Madison's voice closer now. Panic surged. I stepped back, heart in my throat. Mason moved to the window, looking at me for permission. I hesitated too long. Another knock. Louder. He slipped out the window, gone in seconds. I forced my breathing steady and opened the door. Madison stood there, eyes searching mine. Why was the door locked? I must have locked it without thinking, I said, forcing a smile. When she walked away, relief swept through me. But it was short-lived. His presence still lingered in the air, heavy and inescapable. I caught my reflection in the mirror, a stranger staring back at me. I stripped the bed, replaced the sheets, trying to erase him from the room. But no matter how much I tried, I could still feel him everywhere. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every detail of tonight replaying in my mind. The rational part of me screamed this had to stop. But the other part, the one that had been silent for too long, whispered that I had never felt more alive. The house was still, shadows stretching across the floor. And then another knock, softer this time. I froze. Mason. I should have ignored it. I didn't. I opened the door just enough to see him standing there, tense, like he was fighting himself. I know I should go, he murmured. But I can't. Neither could I. He stepped inside. The space between us thickened with unspoken words. I don't know how to stop this, I whispered. I'm not sure I want to, he admitted. And that scares me. Then tell me to leave, he said softly. Couldn't. We stood there, suspended in the quiet, the truth heavy between us. Finally, he stepped back toward the door. If you tell me to forget this, I will. But I don't think either of us can. The door closed behind him, and the silence pressed in. This couldn't continue. It wasn't just about us. But as much as I told myself it was over, I knew the truth.